They tied the paralyzed Apache girl to the rancher's mailbox as a joke, but he took her in and the morning sun rose slowly over the small frontier town, spreading golden light across the dusty streets. Birds chirped quietly from the wooden rooftops, and the faint smell of smoke from early fires drifted through the air. Children ran along the dirt roads, laughing and chasing one another, their carefree voices echoing between the buildings. In one corner of the town, a group of boys gathered near the main street, whispering and nudging each other, their faces full of mischief. They had noticed a young girl walking slowly with the help of crutches. Her name was Maya, a girl from the nearby Apache community. She was small and fragile, her dark hair tied back neatly and her clothes worn from the hard life her family led. Recently she had fallen ill, and the sickness had left her unable to walk without assistance. Her steps were slow, cautious, and careful, but there was a quiet strength in the way she carried herself despite her condition. The boys, laughing nervously to hide their own discomfort, came up with a plan. They thought it would be funny to tie Maya to the rancher's mailbox as a joke. None of them understood the weight of their actions, nor did they think about the pain and fear it would cause her. They whispered among themselves, trying to act brave while secretly feeling a little guilty. "It's just a joke," one said, though the nervous quiver in his voice betrayed him. "She'll be fine," another added, trying to sound confident, but his eyes darted around, worried someone might notice. They did not see that Maya had already sensed their intentions, her sharp eyes watching them carefully from across the street. A shiver ran down her spine, not from the cold, but from the feeling that something was wrong. She stopped and leaned heavily on her crutches, her heart beating faster. Maya had always known that people could be cruel, but she had also learned to hope that kindness could be found even in the smallest gestures. She had grown up listening to the stories of her people, stories of courage, resilience, and care for one another. Still, nothing could prepare her for the fear that hit her when the boys approached. Before she could react, they grabbed her arms gently but firmly, laughing nervously. She struggled, calling out for help, but the sound of her voice seemed to disappear in the morning wind. Her small frame was no match for their strength, and soon she found herself tied to the rancher's mailbox. The rough rope bit into her wrists, leaving red marks on her delicate skin, and she felt a wave of helplessness wash over her. The boy stepped back, pretending to admire their work, while Maya's eyes filled with tears, not from the pain, but from fear and humiliation. The townspeople who had been going about their daily routines noticed the scene and paused. Some laughed, thinking it was a harmless prank, while others frowned, feeling uneasy about the girl's situation. A woman passing by shook her head quietly, muttering to herself, "Children can be so cruel without knowing it." But the laughter was louder than the whispers, and for a moment it seemed like no one would step in. Maya's body trembled as she tried to shift, but her paralysis made even the smallest movements difficult and painful. She felt the rough metal of the mailbox against her back and the coarse rope cutting into her skin. The shame of being watched, tied up like an object, made her heart ache more than the physical pain ever could. At that moment, a horse's hooves clopped against the street, drawing everyone's attention. Samuel, a widowed rancher, was on his usual morning ride, delivering mail to the scattered homes of the town. His tall, strong frame and calm presence commanded attention wherever he went. He noticed the commotion near the mailbox and guided his horse closer, narrowing his eyes as he saw Maya tied up and struggling. His heart clenched at the sight, and a mixture of anger and concern surged through him. He was used to the roughness of frontier life, but cruelty, especially towards someone vulnerable, stirred something deep inside him. Samuel dismounted quickly, steadying himself as he approached the scene. The boys froze, unsure of what to do as the rancher's gaze fell on them. Samuel looked first at Maya, noticing the fear in her eyes and the redness of her wrists from the rope. He knelt down to her level, his voice calm but firm.
"It's okay, little one."
"I'm here now. You're safe." The reassurance in his tone made Maya's tears flow freely. She had not expected anyone to care, and yet here was someone who saw her not as a joke, not as a spectacle, but as a human being in need. Slowly, carefully, Samuel untied the ropes, his strong hands gentle as they worked to free her from the coarse binds. Each knot he loosened seemed to lift some of the weight off Maya's shoulders, though her heart still raced from fear. Once freed, Maya leaned against Samuel, too exhausted to stand on her own. He wrapped a blanket from his saddlebag around her small frame, the warmth offering comfort she hadn't felt in hours. Samuel looked at the boys, his eyes steady. "This is not a game," he said quietly, but there was no anger in his voice, only a seriousness that made them look down in shame. They muttered apologies, though they could not truly understand the depth of what they had done. Samuel's attention, however, remained on Maya. He knew she needed more than just temporary safety. She needed a place where she could heal, a place where she could be treated with care and respect. Gently, Samuel lifted her onto his horse, positioning her carefully so she would not fall. Maya clung to the blanket, her heart still pounding, but the warmth of his presence gave her a small sense of security. As the horse moved slowly through the town, people watched silently. The laughter of the boys had faded, replaced by the soft sounds of the morning and the gentle rhythm of hooves against the ground. Maya's eyes wandered over the town, taking in the familiar sights with a new perspective. Everything seemed different now, softer, quieter, and somehow safer with Samuel nearby. On the way to the ranch, Samuel spoke to Maya softly, telling her that she was brave and that she did not deserve the cruelty she had faced. He shared small stories of his life on the ranch, of animals and fields and quiet mornings like this. Maya listened, the fear in her chest slowly easing as the words washed over her. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different, that someone could see her not for what she lacked but for who she was. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting a warm glow over the open fields and small wooden buildings. Samuel guided Maya carefully off the horse, helping her onto a makeshift seat that would support her as she explored the ranch. The animals, horses, chickens, and goats, looked curiously at the new arrival, and Maya felt a strange sense of peace. She was in a place where she could breathe, where no one would tie her up as a joke, and where someone genuinely cared about her well-being. Maya took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs. The day that had begun with fear and humiliation was slowly transforming into something new. She did not yet know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Samuel watched her closely, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey, one that would test both of them, but one that could also bring healing, friendship, and a sense of family. That evening, as the sun dipped toward the horizon and painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, Maya sat quietly on the porch of the small ranch house. Samuel brought her a warm meal and smiled gently. "You're safe here," he said simply, and the words, though ordinary, carried a weight she had never known before. She nodded, tears still in her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, not fear. For the first time she felt that maybe life could hold kindness, even after cruelty. And in that moment, the events of the morning, the laughter of the boys, the sharp sting of the ropes, the fear and helplessness, began to fade, replaced by the soft promise of safety and care. The ranch, with its open fields and quiet animals, would be the start of a new chapter, one where Maya's strength and courage could grow, nurtured by someone who saw her worth. After that first morning, Maya's life began to change in ways she could not have imagined. Samuel had brought her to his small ranch with care, but now came the challenge of adjusting to a new life. Maya had always lived with her family in the Apache community, surrounded by familiar faces, familiar routines, and a sense of belonging. Even if life had been difficult, now everything was different. The ranch was open and quiet, surrounded by wide fields, a small creek, and animals that eyed her curiously. The wooden fences and barns smelled faintly of hay and dust, and the sunlight reflected off the worn metal tools scattered around the yard. It was beautiful, but unfamiliar, and the first days were filled with uncertainty. Samuel helped Maya settle into the little room he had prepared for her. It was modest but warm, with a small bed, a table, and a chair. The walls were simple and wooden, but the sun from the nearby window made the room glow in a soft, comforting light. "You can rest here," Samuel said gently. "I'll be nearby if you need anything." Maya nodded silently, unsure if she could trust her feelings yet. She had been treated cruelly before, and though Samuel's kindness was real, it felt almost too much to believe. Her small hands fidgeted nervously with the edges of her blanket as she took in the room. For the first few days, Maya mostly stayed inside. Samuel was patient, giving her space to recover from the fear of what had happened at the mailbox. He brought her food, water, and clean clothes, but he never pushed her to do more than she was ready for. At first, Maya was shy and withdrawn, speaking very little. Her voice had grown soft from days of staying quiet, and her eyes, though curious, held the shadow of the fear she had felt. Samuel understood that trust would take time, and he gave her the time she needed. But slowly Maya began to explore. Samuel had made a small ramp so she could move safely between the porch and the yard. She discovered the barn first, a large wooden structure filled with the scents of hay, animals, and earth. Chickens clucked as they moved about, and goats watched her with cautious curiosity. Samuel showed her how to reach the animals without hurting herself, and soon she was able to feed the chickens with careful hands. The simple act of caring for them gave her a sense of purpose and independence she had not felt in weeks. She realized that even though her legs could not carry her like before, she could still do meaningful work. Samuel also helped her adjust to riding in a modified chair he had built for her. It had straps and supports to hold her steady, and a small cushion made it more comfortable. At first, Maya was nervous to try it, fearing she might fall or hurt herself. Samuel walked beside her, holding her steady as she practiced. The first few attempts were slow, but soon she was able to move around the ranch with Samuel guiding her. Each day, she grew a little stronger, a little braver. The small victories built her confidence, and she began to see that her paralysis did not define her entirely. During these days, Samuel and Maya began to talk more. Samuel shared stories of life on the ranch, the hard work, the quiet moments, and the little lessons he had learned about patience and care. Maya listened, fascinated, and gradually began to share stories of her own. She spoke about her family, the traditions of her people, and the times she had felt proud of herself despite her limitations. Samuel listened closely, never interrupting, always showing that he valued her words. Maya felt heard for the first time in a long while, and it gave her a sense of worth that she had almost forgotten. One afternoon, as they sat by the creek near the edge of the property, Samuel asked gently, "Do you miss your home?" Maya nodded. Her eyes reflected both sadness and longing. "I do," she said softly. "I miss my family, and I miss knowing where I belong." Samuel reached out and took her hand carefully. "I understand," he said. "You can still visit them, and they can visit here. This ranch can be a place where you feel safe, not a replacement for your family, but a place where you can grow strong." Maya thought about this, and for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life that included both safety and connection. The animals on the ranch became more than companions. They became friends. Maya grew fond of the horses, especially one gentle mare named Luna, who seemed to understand her in a way that words could not express. Samuel encouraged her to spend time with Luna, brushing her coat, feeding her treats, and even learning small commands. The horse would nuzzle Maya gently, as if offering comfort and friendship. These moments gave her confidence and joy, something that had been absent for a long time. As Maya adjusted to life on the ranch, the small town began to notice the change. People whispered about the girl Samuel had taken in, curious about her presence and how she seemed happier and healthier with each passing day. Some were surprised that Samuel, a man known for his quiet and solitary nature, had opened his home to a child who was not his own. Others began to realize that Maya's life was more than just the prank that had brought her to the ranch. Slowly, the town's perception shifted, and some of the very people who had laughed at her before began to feel a twinge of shame and a new sense of respect. Maya also began to form routines. She learned to help with small tasks, like gathering eggs from the chickens or watering the garden. Samuel taught her about planting seeds, caring for young plants, and harvesting fruits and vegetables. Though her movements were limited, she found ways to participate fully, using her hands and her mind to contribute. Every small accomplishment made her feel capable, and she began to take pride in what she could do rather than focusing only on what she could not. Evenings were quiet and peaceful on the ranch. Samuel would bring her a warm meal, and they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset over the fields. Sometimes Samuel would tell stories about his past, about the ranch, or about the lessons he had learned from life. Maya listened intently, feeling the calm presence of someone who genuinely cared. The sound of the wind through the trees, the soft clucking of the chickens returning to the coop, and the gentle murmur of the creek created a comforting rhythm that made her feel safe and grounded. Gradually, Maya's laughter returned. It was soft at first, hidden beneath the fear and hesitation, but over time it grew louder and more confident. Samuel noticed it, smiling quietly to himself, knowing that the hardest part was not just physical healing, but emotional recovery. Maya had faced cruelty, humiliation, and fear, yet she was learning to trust again, to hope again, and to see the beauty in life, despite the challenges she faced. One day Samuel asked her if she wanted to meet the neighboring families in the town again. Maya hesitated, remembering the boys who had tied her to the mailbox, but Samuel encouraged her gently. "Not everyone is like them," he said. "Some people can be kind if they see you for who you are, not what they think of you." With his support, Maya agreed, and together they ventured toward the town. She was nervous, but she also felt a new strength. She had survived the worst of fear and cruelty, and now she could face the world with Samuel by her side. The journey to town was slow, careful, and deliberate. Maya felt the curious eyes of the townspeople, some whispering, some staring, but she also felt a quiet pride. She was not the helpless girl who had been tied to a mailbox. She was Maya, a girl with courage, resilience, and the support of someone who believed in her. Samuel walked beside her, offering steady reassurance, and in that moment, the world seemed a little kinder. By the time they returned to the ranch, Maya's heart was lighter. She had taken her first steps back into the world beyond the ranch and realized that fear did not have to define her. With patience, care, and small victories, she was learning that life could be full of possibilities. Samuel watched her quietly, proud of her courage and determination. He knew the road ahead would not always be easy, but he also knew that Maya had the strength to face it. As night fell over the ranch, Maya sat quietly in her room, reflecting on the days that had passed. She thought about the prank, the fear, and the loneliness she had felt, and she also thought about the kindness, the warmth, and the hope that Samuel had given her. The first time in a long time, she felt that the future held promise. The ranch was not just a place of safety. It was a place where she could grow, learn, and begin to heal. And as she drifted off to sleep, the stars shining above her small window, she felt a sense of peace she had not known in months. Life on the ranch had settled into a new rhythm, and Maya was slowly discovering a sense of independence she had not known she could have. The first days had been about trust and safety, but now came the real challenge, learning to live fully in a place that was both unfamiliar and full of opportunity. Samuel had been patient from the start, teaching her to care for the animals, to move safely around the property, and to take pride in the work she could do. Each day brought new lessons, and with each lesson, Maya's confidence grew. She began to understand that although her legs could not carry her like before, she could still make a meaningful life with her hands, her mind, and her determination. Maya's favorite part of the day quickly became mornings in the barn. The sun would spill through the open doors, lighting the dust in the air like tiny golden stars. Samuel had helped her set up a small stool and a ramp so she could reach the hay bales and feed the animals safely. Chickens clucked happily as she scattered grain, goats nudged her carefully, and horses watched her with gentle curiosity. At first she had been nervous, worried about spilling or dropping things, but Samuel encouraged her with gentle words. "Take your time. There's no rush here. The animals will wait, and so will I." Slowly she learned the routines of the barn, the quiet communication with the animals, and the satisfaction of completing small tasks on her own. One horse, a gentle mare named Luna, became her favorite. Luna had a soft black coat and calm, intelligent eyes that seemed to understand Maya in a way no one else could. Samuel encouraged her to spend time with Luna, teaching her how to brush her coat, feed her treats, and even guide her around the small paddock. At first, Maya was hesitant. She had been told so many times what she could not do because of her paralysis that she had begun to doubt her own abilities. But Luna seemed patient and accepting, never rushing her, never judging her mistakes. Gradually, Maya began to smile more freely, the joy of her small accomplishments shining in her face. In the afternoons, Samuel and Maya worked together in the garden. Samuel taught her about planting seeds, watering the young plants, and tending to the vegetables. Maya learned to recognize the smell of fresh soil, the gentle green shoots of new life, and the importance of patience and growth. She discovered that even though she could not walk far, she could still contribute meaningfully. Her hands became skilled at careful movements, and she began to notice small changes in the plants and the land. Each success, no matter how small, gave her pride and a sense of accomplishment. As Maya's confidence grew, so did her willingness to speak and share her thoughts. At first, she had only whispered answers to Samuel's questions, hesitant to share too much. But as the days passed, she began to tell him stories of her family, her community, and the traditions she had grown up with. Samuel listened intently, never interrupting, always showing that her words mattered. Maya realized that she could express herself, be heard, and even teach someone else about her experiences. This gave her a sense of agency she had never felt before, and she began to see that life could hold more than just fear and limitations. One day, Samuel asked if she would like to try writing letters to her family. Maya had never used paper and pen much, but Samuel guided her carefully. She wrote slowly, each word a careful effort, explaining where she was, how she was being cared for, and how the ranch had become a place of safety. Samuel encouraged her to draw small pictures as well, showing the animals and the garden. When the letters were finished, Samuel promised to deliver them personally, and Maya felt a warmth she had not known in weeks. It was a connection to her past and a bridge to the future, reminding her that she was not alone in the world. Despite the growing happiness, Maya still faced challenges. Some days were painful, filled with the frustration of her body's limitations. Some mornings her arms ached from the effort of moving, and the desire to run and play like other children felt unbearably far away. But Samuel was always there, offering encouragement without pressure. "It's okay to feel tired," he would say. "Every small effort matters. You are doing more than you realize." His words helped her understand that strength was not only physical, but also mental and emotional. Even when she stumbled or felt discouraged, she began to see that perseverance itself was a triumph. Maya also began to notice changes in the town. The people who had laughed at her or ignored her plight now looked differently when they saw her at the ranch. Some whispered, some nodded respectfully, and a few even stopped to greet her politely. Maya did not seek attention or recognition, but she felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that her courage and Samuel's kindness were shifting the way people thought. The incident at the mailbox, once a source of humiliation, now seemed to mark the beginning of a journey that was changing not just her life, but the awareness of the town as well. In the evenings, the ranch grew quiet. Samuel and Maya would sit on the porch watching the sun dip behind the fields. Sometimes Samuel shared stories of his past, of his childhood, and of the lessons he had learned from the land and the animals. Maya listened carefully, fascinated by the simplicity and honesty of his life. Other nights, she would speak about her own life, sharing memories of her family, her community, and the moments that had shaped her. Through these conversations, they learned from each other, and a bond of trust and respect grew stronger with every passing day. The bond between Maya and Samuel became more than teacher and student, or protector and protected. It grew into something deeper, a partnership built on trust, patience, and mutual care. Maya felt safe enough to laugh and play, to make mistakes and try again, and to dream of a future where her paralysis was not the central part of her identity. Samuel felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that he had the chance to shape a life with kindness and support. The ranch, once quiet and routine, became a place of shared growth and discovery. One afternoon, a gentle breeze carried the distant sounds of the town into the ranch. Maya watched from the porch as children played, some on horseback, some running along the streets. For a moment she felt a pang of longing for the freedom to move as they did. But then she looked at Luna, the garden, and Samuel, and she realized that freedom was not only about running, it was also about being able to live fully, with purpose and care. She had her own world here, one that offered safety, learning, and love. She smiled, feeling a quiet contentment that she had never known before. Samuel noticed the change in her as well. "You're stronger than you realize," he said one evening, watching the sun set behind the hills, "not just in body, but in heart and mind. You've come a long way in a short time, and I'm proud of you." Maya's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of gratitude. She had faced fear, cruelty, and uncertainty, yet here she was, learning, growing, and feeling hope again. Samuel's belief in her had given her courage, and she now believed in herself too. As the days turned into weeks, Maya became more skilled at navigating the ranch. She learned to organize her tasks, help Samuel with chores, and even anticipate what needed to be done before he asked. Her small victories gave her independence, and with that independence came a sense of pride. She was no longer just the girl who had been tied to the mailbox. She was Maya, a resilient, capable, and courageous young girl, shaping her own life with determination and care. Maya's presence also began to affect the animals in a new way. Luna became more playful and gentle, responding to Maya's growing confidence. The goats followed her carefully as she moved through the yard, and even the chickens seemed to recognize her as a kind and reliable caretaker. Samuel watched this quietly, understanding that Maya's influence on the ranch was more than just her work. It was her spirit, her patience, and her growing connection to life around her. By the end of Part 3, Maya had not only adapted to life on the ranch but had begun to thrive. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. She had discovered that independence came in many forms, and that even small actions could create meaningful change. And most importantly, she had found a place where she was valued, loved, and able to grow, not just in body but in heart and spirit. The ranch had become more than a home. It had become a place of learning, healing, and hope. Maya's journey was far from over, but she now faced the future with strength, confidence, and a quiet joy that no prank or cruelty could ever take away. Weeks had passed since Maya had first arrived at the ranch, and she had grown stronger in ways that went beyond her body. She had learned to navigate the ranch with confidence, care for the animals, and even help Samuel with tasks that once seemed impossible. But life, Samuel knew, could not shelter her forever. There were still lessons to be learned, and part of that journey involved facing the past rather than avoiding it. One morning as the sun rose over the fields, Maya was tending to Luna in the paddock when she noticed movement at the edge of the property. Two of the boys from town, the ones who had tied her to the mailbox weeks ago, were approaching. Their expressions were cautious, almost uncertain, as they came closer to the ranch. Maya felt a flicker of fear in her chest, the familiar tension of those early days returning. She had worked hard to feel safe, and now the past was stepping into her present. Samuel was nearby, noticing the boys before Maya did. He walked over calmly, placing himself slightly between her and the approaching figures. "Who are they?" Maya whispered, her voice tinged with worry. Samuel shook his head gently. "Just some boys from town. They want to talk. You can decide if you want to face them." Maya hesitated, unsure if she had the courage. She remembered the humiliation, the fear, and the helplessness of that day at the mailbox. But then she looked at Luna, the garden, and Samuel, and she realized that she was no longer the same frightened girl. She had grown. She had strength. And now it was time to face them. When the boys reached the porch, they stopped, looking at Maya with uncertain expressions. They had expected fear, maybe tears, maybe a scene that would amuse them. But what they saw instead was a girl sitting upright, her eyes steady and calm, with Samuel standing silently behind her. There was no trembling, no panic, only quiet courage. Maya's gaze met theirs, and she spoke, her voice clear and firm. "You tied me to a mailbox and laughed.
You thought it was funny, but it hurt."
And it was wrong." The boys shifted uncomfortably, their bravado fading under the weight of her words. They muttered apologies, though they seemed unsure how to express true remorse. Maya did not shout or cry. She did not try to scare them. Instead, she showed the calm strength that had grown within her over the past weeks.
I'm not afraid anymore, she said quietly. And I want you to understand that cruelty has consequences.
What you did was wrong, and I hope you never do it to anyone else. Samuel watched silently, proud of her courage. He had guided her, protected her, and given her the tools to feel safe. But this moment was hers alone. Maya's words carried honesty and conviction, and the boys could not ignore them. One of them, the tallest, looked down at his feet, ashamed. We didn't think, he stammered. We didn't mean to, his voice trailed off, but Maya shook her head. Intentions don't erase hurt, she replied softly yet firmly. You have to understand what it feels like to be powerless, to be laughed at, and to be made fun of when you can't help yourself. That's not fair! You need to think about the people around you before you act. The boys listened in silence. They were young and inexperienced, but they began to grasp the impact of their actions. They had thought of Maya as weak and helpless, but they now saw her strength, her resilience, and the calm dignity with which she faced them. For the first time, they realized that their cruelty had consequences that went far beyond a moment of amusement. Maya continued, explaining how she had adjusted to life at the ranch. She described her daily routines, her work with the animals, and the support Samuel had given her. I have learned that I can do more than I thought, she said.
I am stronger than you believed, and I want you to know that it's never too late to change, to be kind, and to make better choices.
Samuel finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. You see, boys, he said, strength is not about teasing someone smaller or weaker. True strength is in protecting, helping, and caring for others. Maya has shown courage every day. You can learn from her example if you are willing. One of the boys, the shortest and youngest, finally spoke up. We didn't think about it like that. We were stupid. We just wanted to be funny. Maya nodded. I understand that, she said gently. But understanding is not enough. You have to remember it. And you have to do better next time. For a moment, the tension in the air was thick. The boys had expected fear or anger, but instead, they were met with honesty, calm strength, and the possibility of forgiveness. It was a lesson they had not anticipated, and it unsettled them. They looked at each other, then at Maya, realizing that their actions had consequences far beyond what they had imagined. Maya took a deep breath, letting go of some of the lingering fear that had accompanied her all morning. I'm not going to hate you, she said quietly. I forgive you, but that doesn't mean you should forget what you did. Use this as a lesson. Treat people with kindness, even if they are different from you. That is the only way you will grow into better people. The boys nodded, some swallowing hard, clearly moved by her words. Samuel watched them, knowing that this encounter would stay with them longer than any punishment ever could. Maya had turned a moment of fear and cruelty into a lesson in courage, empathy, and understanding. After a few moments, the boys slowly backed away, their faces thoughtful and serious. They muttered small apologies again, this time with more sincerity, and turned toward the town. Maya watched them leave, feeling a strange mix of relief and pride. She had faced her fear, confronted the people who had hurt her, and come out stronger. The ranch had given her more than safety. It had given her the tools to face the world with courage. Samuel guided Maya back toward the barn. You did well, he said quietly. You spoke your truth, and you showed them the strength that comes from kindness and patience. I am proud of you. Maya smiled, feeling the warmth of pride and gratitude. She realized that courage was not only about standing up to others, but also about standing up for herself, even when fear wanted to hold her back. Over the following days, the encounter with the boys became a quiet turning point. Maya's confidence continued to grow, and the town began to take notice. Some townspeople who had laughed at her or ignored her plight now greeted her respectfully when she visited the edge of town. The story of her courage and resilience spread slowly, not as gossip, but as an example of the strength that comes from facing adversity with grace. Maya also continued to thrive on the ranch. She expanded her work with the animals, helping Samuel with tasks that required planning and thought. She began teaching small skills she had learned to the younger children who sometimes visited, sharing her knowledge and patience. Her independence continued to grow, and she discovered the joy of being able to contribute meaningfully to her surroundings. In the evenings, the ranch returned to its peaceful rhythm. Maya and Samuel would sit on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the fields, the animals settling in for the night. They spoke quietly about the day, about lessons learned, and about hopes for the future. Maya reflected on how far she had come, from the fear and humiliation of being tied to a mailbox to standing strong in the face of those who had caused her harm. The transformation was not only physical, but emotional, a change that would last a lifetime. One evening, as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Maya spoke softly. "I feel different now," she said. "I'm not afraid the way I was. I know I can face challenges. And I know that kindness matters more than I ever understood before." Samuel nodded. "That is the greatest lesson of all," he said. "Courage, patience, and kindness. They carry you further than fear or anger ever could." Maya looked up at the stars, the cool night air brushing her face. She felt a sense of calm and purpose. She had faced her past, embraced her present, and was ready to shape her future. The ranch was no longer just a place of safety. It was a place of growth, learning, and resilience. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the sounds of the night and the gentle presence of Samuel, Maya understood that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. The events of the mailbox incident, once a source of fear and humiliation, had now become a defining moment in her life. She had turned pain into strength, cruelty into understanding, and fear into courage. Maya's journey was far from over, but she now faced the future with determination, hope, and a growing sense of confidence. The ranch had given her a sanctuary, but it had also given her something more powerful. The knowledge that she could stand tall, face adversity, and inspire change simply by being herself. And so, as the night settled over the ranch, Maya sat quietly reflecting on her journey. She thought about the boys who had hurt her, the kindness Samuel had shown, and the strength she had discovered within herself. She understood that life would continue to bring challenges, but she now had the courage to face them. The ranch was her home, the animals were her companions, and Samuel was her guide and friend. Together they had turned a painful beginning into a story of resilience, growth, and hope. A story that would continue to unfold with each passing day. Maya had come a long way since the day she was tied to the mailbox. The small, quiet ranch had become her home, her sanctuary, and her classroom. Every day she learned something new about animals, the land, and herself. Samuel had guided her with patience, care, and wisdom. But the strength she now carried was her own. She could move with confidence, care for the animals, and even help with tasks that required careful planning. The girl who had once been frightened and unsure now walked, wheeled, with determination and pride through the fields and barns. The town, which had once laughed at her, began to notice the changes. People whispered, first with curiosity, then with respect. Some of the children who had played tricks on others now stopped and listened when she spoke. The adults, too, seemed to understand that Maya had grown beyond the helpless girl they had once assumed she was. She did not seek attention or praise, but her courage and kindness made an impression on everyone she met. Slowly, she became a symbol of resilience, showing the town that strength came in many forms. One morning, Samuel and Maya walked along the edge of the fields, planning the day's work. Luna, her beloved horse, trotted beside them, occasionally nudging her gently.
Samuel paused and looked at Maya, a quiet smile on his face.
"You've come so far," he said softly. "I've watched you grow stronger every day. But it's not just your body, Maya. It's your courage, your patience, and your heart." Maya smiled, feeling warmth and pride. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. "You helped me see that I could do more than I thought." Samuel shook his head gently. "No, Maya. The courage was always inside you. I just helped you believe in it. Maya had also begun to reach out to her community. She wanted to share the lessons she had learned, not to boast, but to help others see that kindness and determination could change lives. She started spending time with younger children in the town, teaching them to care for animals, respect the land, and be patient with one another. Some children had been cruel before, but now they listened. They learned that teasing and cruelty only hurt, while patience and understanding could make life better for everyone. Maya became a quiet teacher, showing others the strength of compassion through her own example. Even the boys who had tied her to the mailbox were learning. They visited the ranch with Samuel's encouragement, helping with small chores, and learning from Maya's guidance. At first, they were awkward and unsure. But as they worked alongside her, they began to understand what it meant to act with care and responsibility. Maya forgave them, not out of weakness, but because she understood that forgiveness could help people change. She showed them that strength was not about power or control, but about honesty, courage, and kindness.
Life on the ranch was not always easy.
There were still difficult days when Maya's body reminded her of her limitations, when chores were tiring, or when the wind brought cold and rain. But she had learned to face challenges with patience and determination. Samuel was always nearby offering support, but Maya no longer relied entirely on him. She had become independent in her own way, able to make decisions, solve problems, and contribute meaningfully to the ranch. Her confidence inspired Samuel as much as it inspired the town. He realized that Maya had grown into a young woman of remarkable strength, resilience, and character. The animals remained central to her life. Luna was her constant companion, always gentle and understanding, while the goats, chickens, and even the smaller animals seemed to respond to her calm presence. Maya had learned to communicate with them, noticing small changes in behavior, responding to their needs, and celebrating their little successes. She discovered that caring for others, whether human or animal, was a powerful way to grow and build confidence. Each day brought new responsibilities and new moments of joy. One afternoon, as Maya sat in the garden planting new seeds, she reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the day she was tied to the mailbox, the fear, the humiliation, and the helplessness. The memory still made her shiver, but it no longer held power over her. That day had been the beginning of a journey, one that had taught her courage, patience, and the power of kindness. She realized that the world could be harsh, but it could also be gentle and nurturing when she chose to face it with strength. Maya also began to dream of the future. She thought about ways she could help others, especially children who might be facing difficulties similar to her own. She wanted to teach them that limitations do not define a person, and that courage, perseverance, and kindness can overcome fear and cruelty. Her dreams were no longer small or timid. They were full of hope, purpose, and the desire to make the world a better place. Samuel watched her quietly from the porch, seeing the young woman she had become. He felt a sense of pride and joy that he had rarely experienced. He had opened his home to a frightened girl, and in return, he had witnessed the growth of someone remarkable. Maya's journey was a reminder that care, patience, and belief in another person could create life-changing results. She had transformed the ranch herself, and even the town in ways that no one could have predicted. The town slowly adapted to Maya's presence and influence. People began to approach her respectfully, asking her advice on caring for animals or learning new skills. Some parents brought their children to the ranch so they could see her example of courage and independence. Maya welcomed them warmly, showing them not only how to work with the animals but also how to approach life with patience, kindness, and understanding. She was no longer the girl who had been tied to a mailbox. She was a teacher, a guide, and an inspiration. One day the boys who had once laughed at her came to the ranch again, not as pranksters but as helpers. They carried hay, helped with chores, and listened to Maya's guidance. She spoke to them calmly, teaching them lessons about respect, responsibility, and the importance of thinking about others before acting. They listened, slowly learning that true strength came from kindness and care. By the end of the day, they left with a deeper understanding of what it meant to be responsible and compassionate. As the seasons changed, Maya continued to grow. She learned more about the land, the animals, and the rhythms of the ranch. She became skilled in tasks that once seemed impossible, and she discovered that her limitations did not define her potential. Each success built her confidence, and each challenge taught her resilience. She had become a strong, capable young woman, ready to face the world with courage and grace. One quiet evening, as the sun set behind the hills and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Maya sat with Samuel on the porch, reflecting on the journey they had shared. "I never thought life could be like this," she said softly. "I never imagined I could feel safe, strong, and proud of myself." Samuel nodded, his eyes full of warmth. "You've done all of this yourself, Maya. I only helped you see it. The courage, patience, and kindness have always been inside you." Maya smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She thought about the day she had been tied to the mailbox, the fear and humiliation she had felt, and the journey that had followed. Every step, every challenge, every moment of care and encouragement had brought her here, to a place of confidence, independence, and hope. She understood now that life's difficulties did not have to define a person. Rather, the choices one made in response to them could shape a future full of strength and purpose. The ranch had become more than a home. It was a place of growth, learning, and resilience. Maya had transformed not only herself, but also the lives of those around her, the town, the children, the animals, and even Samuel. Her journey showed that compassion, courage, and patience could overcome cruelty and fear, creating a lasting impact that reached far beyond the boundaries of a single place or moment. As the stars began to twinkle in the evening sky, Maya felt a quiet peace. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she was ready to face them. She had learned the power of resilience, the importance of kindness, and the value of self-belief. The girl who had once been helpless was now a young woman with strength, wisdom, and hope for the future. And so, under the wide-open sky, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the ranch and the supportive presence of Samuel, Maya's story reached a new beginning. It was a story of courage born from fear, strength born from struggle, and kindness that had the power to change the world. She had turned a cruel prank into a journey of growth and transformation, and in doing so had shown everyone, herself included, that even in the hardest moments, hope, resilience, and love could create a life full of meaning and joy. Maya's journey would continue, but she was no longer defined by her past. She had become a symbol of perseverance, compassion, and courage, a reminder that even when life begins with fear or pain, it can grow into something extraordinary when met with determination and care. The ranch, the animals, the town, and Samuel had all played a part, but it was Maya's spirit that shone the brightest. And in that quiet, star-filled night, with the wind whispering through the trees and Luna nuzzling her gently, Maya understood something she had never known before. She was not just surviving, she was thriving, and the best chapters of her life were still waiting to be written.